Thank you.
I think as long as the candidate's here, you can start.
Okay, super. All right, we have Linda Sell for District 1. Linda, you're okay to have this interview recorded?
Yes.
And if anyone in this room is a family member or paid staff of any of the other candidates, we ask that you leave at this point. You can return back to the main room. Okay, the format is for each candidate to be interviewed individually and sequentially. Linda Sell is our first candidate. The questions are the same for each candidate, and each candidate has the same amount of response time. Martin is our timekeeper, and I will be asking the questions. And we'll start with a 1-minute opening statement. There are 6 questions, and each with a 2-minute response time, and then a lightning round of 4 questions with a 30-second response time, and then a 1-minute closing statement. All right, so Linda, if you are ready, ask that you can see Martin's Zoom square because his screen will show the time remaining.
Yeah, I can see Martin's Zoom square, but I can't see his timer yet.
Okay. All right. If you're ready, you can please begin with your 1-minute opening statement.
Okay. I've been an engineer, a parent, and a community volunteer nonprofit board member, volunteering in the community for my whole adult life. And as I reflect on major themes in my life, it has been to make sure this community works for the next generation. And in 2010, started off my community advocacy work by raising funds to prevent drastic cuts in our school system and raise 2.5 million in 8 weeks with parents, school district, and foundation. That showed me the power of the community working together. Now my concerns are focused on turning to other aspects impacting the quality of life in Sunnyvale, so that the next generation can come back, so that we will have a diverse and vibrant community. I'm interested in climate action and sustainability and hope to facilitate improvements in all those areas for the Sunnyvale residents.
Thank you.
And I lost Martin, my screen.
If you use the pin function, that will probably be easiest.
If I pin you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Martin, if you raise your hand, that
Okay.
pops you to the top too.
Okay. So I pinned Martin. Okay.
Okay. The first question is, what are the top 3 challenges for your district, and what are you going to do about them? And you have 2 minutes to respond.
Okay. So one challenge in my district is housing affordability for new families. This is resulting in decreasing school enrollment for our elementary school system, which is a big challenge for our schools. The US Census data says the average homeowner in Sunnyvale home costs $1.4 million. For houses for sale currently in District 1, the average house price is $2.2 million. Another challenge in my district is public transit is not frequent in District 1. So more transit to be economical in my district there should be more density near the transit. So as a city council member, I can be supportive and answer questions of local community questions and listen to feedback about higher density development in my district so that the community can be more supportive of these developments that are being planned. And those developments can create lower housing costs in District 1 and also increase traffic transit near those developments in District 1. This includes the 500 housing units planned for the 4 corners of Village Center 1 at the intersection of Fremont and Mary and the mixed use areas in El Camino specific plan. A third top challenge is bicycle safety. According to Sunnyvale roadway plan approved in 2020, several intersections have high number of collisions in District 1 and other parts of Sunnyvale. So we need to keep finding a means to find funding for safety improvements sooner than later. And I will, as a city council member, keep looking for efforts to support grants and other funding to accelerate improving safety in these areas and other areas.
All right, thank you. The next question is, the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in Sunnyvale is from transportation. The Climate Action Playbook calls for a 20% per capita vehicle miles traveled reduction by 2030 to address this pollution. What should Sunnyvale do to expedite and incentivize this goal? 2 minutes to respond.
Transportation-related emissions account for just over a quarter of the greenhouse gas emissions. We need a multi-pronged approach. First, transit-oriented development growth mindset to ensure that our housing is accessible to all income levels and that transportation and housing are truly linked. In addition to housing near transit system, we also need biking and walkable communities to make that a viable, safe way for people to get around Sunnyvale and beyond. The higher cost housing near job centers in Silicon Valley has made living close to where you work and where you live difficult and near impossible for many. And this has caused untenable social economic inequality that has raised environmental concerns too. So housing that supports transit oriented community and new housing that has a higher degree of affordability would benefit our communities. And as a city council member, I'd like to see higher density in places that we can have transit be successful, such as the village centers, El Camino, and Moffett Park areas, in which increasing density near those areas, transit corridors will help transit. In addition, finding grants and other funding to accelerate bike infrastructure safety, walkability, getting around Sunnyvale, these can help reach and surpass our Sunnyvale BMT reduction goals.
Okay, thank you. Here's the next question. Because Silicon Valley Clean Energy provides greenhouse gas-free electricity, what are city policies you would recommend for electrifying buildings, transportation, and other infrastructure?
Okay. It is estimated that a third of California's 245 building stock will be built between now and 2045. So decarbonizing newly constructed buildings is key. Since buildings take much longer than vehicles to transition to electrification, we need to move faster and have more of an impact, including setting standards through state building, through the building codes and planning incentives for electric equipment in buildings. As a council member, I would like to explore ways in which city, county, state, federal programs can support reduce interest loans for voluntary building decarbonization projects, expediting building permits for zero emission building conversions, programs that will educate and advise people who are planning new construction or large renovations about the cost savings and health benefits of all electric buildings. And by electrifying transportation sector with carbon-free electricity, we can reduce one of the largest forms of pollution in our state and in our city. And the added benefit of this is cheaper than petroleum. So make community public charging more convenient, available, especially in low income areas, support mass transportation. In addition, e-bikes are a really good form of transportation that is taking off right now. And so lastly, the city's own consumption, I would advocate for the city to transition to more renewable energy sources for its operation, vehicles, water system, and buildings.
Thank you. All right, the next question is, Sunnyvale and the Bay Area continue to face a drastic housing shortage. What should the city be doing to reduce constraints to increasing housing stock? What are the particular housing problems in your district, and what would you do to stop displacement?
To reduce constraints to increase stock, I, as a city council member, would want to follow through with the plans that are planned, as I spoke about before, and galvanize support for these new developments in District 1 and beyond. In the past, the city of Sunnyvale issued 4,743 permits for housing units from the start of the 5th cycle planning period for RENA. And the city permitted double the number of housing units for moderate income RENA, but it did not meet its goals for moderate and low income. So hopefully we can do better going forward. The city of Sunnyvale in the new housing, it will have a projected population increase of 33%. And according to the 223-231 housing element, Sunnyvale's RENA is planned to be 11,966 units. The city will provide plans to do 14,000. So there will be a buffer, and specific plans include like planned housing units at the Village Center, at Moffett Park, and at El Camino, and downtown specific plan. And I would also support reducing parking minimums at locations close to transit, looking forward to the results of a city study on this issue. Some cities have gotten rid of parking, reformed parking minimums, and this can lead to lower costs of affordable housing and other developments, which is encouraging other forms of transportation.
Thank you. Next is, what should be the city's responsibility toward the unhoused, and how would you implement this?
So I serve as the Housing and Human Services Commission Vice Chair, but I'm speaking on my personal behalf as an individual. But I believe that the city of Sunnyvale should continue to work with our partners, such as the Sunnyvale Community Service, to invest efforts to make the most difference for those most in need in our community. While serving on the commission these past 2 years during COVID, I have seen that the quantity of those needing help has increased sharply. However, our staff, our city staff, our commission and city council have worked collaboratively to with the nonprofits and federal agencies to get relief to people in most need. And that has made a difference, but there still needs to be more work that needs to be done. According to city documents, there's 624 individuals experiencing homelessness in Sunnyvale. 477 are unsheltered and staying places that are designated unfit for human habitation. 147 are utilizing emergency shelter. Many of those expressing homelessness are dealing with severe issues of mental illness, substance abuse, and that are potentially life-threatening and require additional assistance. So as you can see, we need to do more, and as a community, we can best help by continuing to partner with the nonprofits on programs that are planned and more programs beyond that, such as safe parking, transitional housing, counseling, wraparound services, funds to help with eviction relief, food assistance, and more. So we need to continue what we're doing and find means to, if possible, do more.
And then the last of the 2-minute questions is, what do you see as the obstacles to civic participation by all demographics in Sunnyvale? And how would you mitigate these?
Okay. Recently, the city, and before that, has utilized surveys to solicit input on home transfer tax and names for parks. And I would like to see an increased use of surveys for all important decisions in the city. And at some point when the council meets back in person, for there to be efforts to use the hybrid model to enable people to participate remotely and give public comment. I would also myself personally reach out to various groups and organizations and also encourage the city to do that where possible, so that people would learn about activities happening in the city. Where possible, people could provide input, how they could get involved, and I would there would be examples of where the community input has greatly helped. I am impressed with the Sunnyvale City Climate Action Plan development, in which wide input has been received, and the staff and the Sustainability Commission and consultants work to looking at prioritizing this input, and it assists in the development of a plan. And then after the plan is finalized, to have status to the community with their dashboard. So I think that is a good model to have that be done in other cases if possible in the city on projects.
All right, next is our lightning round with 30-second responses to 4 different questions. Ready for that?
Sure.
Okay. First question, what are your top 3 priorities for Sunnyvale?
My top 3
Yes.
is to work on climate issues so that we do our part in saving the planet. Another is to make sure that this community does well for this generation and the next generation. So having affordable housing for different economic levels is important. And lastly, I think safety is important. So bike safety is something that's near and dear to me because I've always cared about students, and biking is healthier. And
Okay, next is, should the city increase the allowed density for village centers above 18 housing units per acre?
I think that it depends on the plan. So if it's right against the fence line, then maybe having like a lot of stories to get to that higher than 18 would be difficult for the neighbors to accept that. But if it were more inner towards it, then it made sense that having more than 18 would be fine. So it's case by case. I would be open to that. And also reaching out to neighbors to explain why it's important.
Okay, next is, how important is diversity and representation on the council?
I think diversity is important to reflect our community. I also think that them being on the council needs to be reaching out to the diverse community. So it's hand in hand. There needs to be diversity, and also the people there need to be reaching out to the diverse demographics all over our city, so that we can be a reflection and a representative democracy of all the diverse communities of Sunnyvale.
All right, and last question on the lightning round. Do you support banning the use of pesticides on city-owned property?
I myself could not see why you couldn't do that, because there seems like there could be alternatives that are more healthier but control the weeds and all that stuff. So I would be on the side of banning pesticides, but I would look to staff and the study issue to confirm my inclination of that.
Okay, that concludes the lightning round, and you now have the opportunity for a 1-minute closing statement.
Okay, so I have enjoyed being a part of the Sunnyvale Democratic Club for the last 6 years, serving as president, vice president, membership director, secretary, and I am endorsed for city council in this race by Congressman Khanna, State Senator Cortese, State Senator Becker, Supervisor Lee, and all 7 of the current Sunnyvale City Council members and 3 former Sunnyvale mayors. In addition to housing affordability, safety, improved public transportation, bike infrastructure, and taking care of those most in need in our community and maintaining our community, I am most concerned about there being a sustainable planet and environment for the next generation to live. So climate change is still preventable, and I'm running for city council so that Sunnyvale can show the community around us and beyond us policies that will help us do our part to save the planet.
Thank you so much, Linda, for your statements and responses. And this concludes this portion of the
Thank
time.
you for letting me participate, and great questions.
Thank you. So now we will transition. I guess Linda will leave this breakout room and we'll bring in Justin Wang.
Okay, Justin is next.
Yes.
Okay.
So yeah, there's only a single candidate running so far for District 1, and now we're going to move to the District 3 seat where we have 2 candidates we'll be interviewing. First of which is Justin Wang.
Justin's in the room.
I don't see him, but oh, there he is. Yes.
Hi,
Hello,
everyone.
Justin. Great. Okay, so if I'm not going to, is it okay if we record this? We are recording already.
Oh, absolutely. Please do.
Okay, great. All right, and if there is anyone in the room that is a family member or paid staff of any other candidate not associated with Mr. Wang, we ask that you leave at this point. All right, and I'll just repeat what I said on the previous candidate interview. The questions for each candidate are the same, and you each have the same amount of time for responses. Martin Pine is our timekeeper, and so if you can find him and probably pin his Zoom window, that will help you see his time and the amount of time you have remaining.
I am currently searching for Martin.
Okay, I
will find him.
can you, I'm going to pop my hand up for a moment.
Oh.
If I can find the reaction tab. You should be able to find me now.
Yep, I can, although
I'm going to pop the hand down after you find me so it doesn't cover up the numbers.
that is a fantastic idea. So yeah, I got you, Martin. Thank you.
Cool.
Okay, so we're going to start with a 1-minute opening statement, and then we'll be following that with 6 questions, each with a 2-minute response time, and then a lightning round of 4 questions with a 30-second response time, and then a 1-minute closing statement.
That sounds great.
All right, so when you're ready, you can begin with your opening statement.
All right. Martin, you'll put on the timer after I start speaking?
Yeah, just start answering and I'll start the timer when you start speaking.
Got it. All right, thank you. So hi, everyone. My name is Justin Wang, and of course, I am running for City Council. So I'm proud to say that I was born and raised right here in Sunnyvale. I graduated from Homestead High School, go Mustangs, and I attended De Anza College, where I transferred to UCLA and graduated with a degree in political science and education studies. So when I came home, I built my career at Greenbelt Alliance, which is a conservation and land use advocacy nonprofit that's been around for over 60 years. I'm an environmentalist at heart, and all of my work has been grounded in climate resilience. One of my proudest accomplishments at Greenbelt includes successfully pushing the San Jose City Council to permanently protect over 350 acres of open space in Coyote Valley. I'm also a primary and contributing author of half a dozen case studies that are laser focused on addressing the worsening drought that we are in. I've served on San Jose's COVID-19 relief task force to help steward a multi-million-dollar budget. I'm currently serving as a Sunnyvale Sustainability Commissioner and served as vice chair of Livable Sunnyvale for 2 years. I'm excited to use what I've learned about good governance
Time.
and relationships. Okay, got it.
Okay, thank you. And our first question is, what are the top 3 challenges for your district, and what would you propose to do about them? And you have 2 minutes to respond.
Great. What a great question, and surprising. I didn't see this one coming. In the past few months, I've had many conversations with local community leaders in addition to knocking on doors and talking to folks in my neighborhood, because I think that's the best way to learn about what's important to all of our community members. So what I found is that D3 residents really care about quality of life and sense of place in Sunnyvale. Specifically, many issues at the door included, but are not limited to, public safety, transit, and traffic infrastructure, quality and maintenance of our parks. So with public safety, I've heard concerns about property crime. While Sunnyvale is, by the numbers, one of the safest cities in the United States, news about crimes that do happen, tend to spread quickly. And that's why, as your council member, I will ensure that the Department of Public Safety has all of the tools necessary to ensure our residents both are safe, but also feel safe. So tools such as those needed to completely staff up our department as allocated by the budget, and tools that provide data for us to make sound policy decisions and program rollouts of our public safety services. So with transportation, I've heard a tremendous amount of concern. I actually live right next to East El Camino Real and Sunnyvale Saratoga Road, which is actually the intersection in Sunnyvale with the highest number of bicycle-related collisions. So in the entire city. So families in my neighborhood that feed into elementary school have to cross El Camino if they want to walk. And many of them, remember the accident that happened, back with Peterson Middle School back in 2019, and they opt to drive instead, even though it's barely a mile. And that's why I'll work with our local elected leaders on our school boards to ensure we have safe routes to school. And I'm proud to be endorsed by 4 out of 5 of the Fremont Union High School District Board of Trustees and Sunnyvale School District Trustees, Isabel Jubes-Flamerick and Bridget Watson. And finally, with our parks, I am grateful to our current council for approving DPW 22-03, which is regarding mitigation measures for nuisance bird populations, because people do not like Canadian geese. And it's really important that we also explore recycled water for our parks for a variety of reasons.
All right, thank you. Our next question is, the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in Sunnyvale is from transportation. The Climate Action Playbook calls for a 20% per capita vehicle miles traveled reduction by 2030 to address this pollution. What should Sunnyvale do to expedite and incentivize this goal?
Thank you, Crystal. I love this question. As a sustainability commissioner and as someone that used to work at Greenbelt Alliance for 2.5 years, this is my bread and butter. The answer in a nutshell is that we need to get people out of cars. And unfortunately, that is as simple as it gets, because as with most things, there is no silver bullet. The city council just passed a study issue exploring reducing parking minimums, which is a great step in the right direction. And 3 other steps that I think are really key are, the first is to build out, of course, the active transportation plan that we already have. So as a city, we've already identified key areas of improvement for bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure that we can focus on, and this will give us tremendous bang for our buck. By unfreezing, in addition to this, by unfreezing transportation planner positions and budgeting for these improvements, we can start making the right choice, the easy choice. But it's also critical to recognize that there are community members who cannot fully utilize active transportation infrastructure, and it's important that we don't leave them behind. So whether it's really young children, those with disabilities, or senior citizens, we need to make sure we have transportation solutions that work for everyone. And that's why I strongly support exploring a shuttle that is electric, of course, that can get people where they need to go. Secondly, and I touched on this in my earlier answer, but I really can't emphasize this enough, we really need to support safe routes to school. I still remember when I was in high school and one of my friends, invited me to bike to school with them, and I thought that was going to be a whole, it was going to be a ton of fun. And my parents said absolutely not, because they were worried for my safety. They'd seen articles about kids getting hit, and it is a real fear that people have. And so we really need to make sure that we try, we implement tried and true solutions like hog beacons, high visibility crosswalks, bulb outs, all of which are laid out in the ATP. And there's parts of District 3 that feed into Cupertino Middle School, where people have to bike for miles along Fremont or Homestead, and that is a tremendously unsafe corridor as is. And finally, I think and this might be even the most important, is to support the transit-oriented development. And Moffett Park is a great opportunity to put a tremendous amount of housing near jobs. which will do great.
Thank you. The next question, because Silicon Valley Clean Energy provides greenhouse gas-free electricity, what are city policies you would recommend for electrifying buildings, transportation, and other infrastructure?
Yeah, so some policies that I would love to explore are, streamlining and the permitting of and easing regulations on heat pumps. I've talked to neighbors and community members who have wanted to do the right thing, by getting heat pumps, which are vastly more energy efficient and are cleaner, but they just get tangled up in the red tape. There's regulations about where they can be and, setbacks and stuff like that. And it's, and then they decide to get a furnace, which has a useful life of decades, and that's emitting, that's producing tremendous amounts of emissions over its lifetime. So something else is also battery programs, because, solar is doing great, but also, fortunately, people don't only use electricity when the sun is shining. So we really need to explore programs to help get that infrastructure in place. But something that I would love to talk, get on my soapbox about, and something that the question takes for granted that I think we should actually think about, is that the advancement that we've made in greening our electricity are at risk. Actually, the battle for greenhouse gas-free electricity is not over, and Silicon Valley Clean Energy is actually under attack. And this is going to get a little wonky, so I hope you can bear with me. There's something called a power charge indifference adjustment, and this is basically a fee that SVC pays, Silicon Valley Clean Energy pays to PG&E, because SVC utilizes legacy infrastructure, and that's fair. What's not fair is the rate of increase of this PCIA, this fee. So one of our neighbors, San Jose Clean Energy, which is essentially San Jose's version of SVC, actually had to take out loans to pay for their solvency plan, because the state essentially requires CCAs to have savings account, and they didn't have enough in their account. So in short, they're at risk and they had to take out a loan. And frankly, this whole conversation, the future of green energy, is a state decision, and it is far, far from a foregone conclusion. And so the biggest thing that we need to do is to make sure that the state is looking out for green energy statewide. And this is something that we'll need to do work on across jurisdictional lines, and work with our representatives like Josh Becker, Evan Lowe, and Mark Berman, all of whom I've been working to build relationships with. And so ultimately, there are lots of programs that I would like to push through the city and through SVC, but they can only happen if we protect SVC.
Thanks for that. The next question is, Sunnyvale and the Bay Area continue to face a drastic housing shortage. What should the city be doing to reduce constraints to increasing housing stock? And what are the particular housing problems in your district? And what would you do to stop displacement?
Yeah, environment and housing is just these softballs after softballs, because you're making it too easy. I think there's a few easy things that the city can do to reduce constraints to increasing housing stock. And the first is very simple: budget for more planners to accomplish the goals of the LUT, the land use and transportation element that was passed. And the second is also simple: we need to make it easy to build more density where it makes sense. And I do want to thank the current and former council members who have voted to upzone our specific plan areas like Lawrence Station and El Camino Real and Moffett Park. And these are all great examples of transit-oriented development that we need absolutely more of. And I think where we're missing the mark is our village centers. These are some of the best opportunities that we have to build more housing, particularly in South Sunnyvale. And, this is where we can build thriving, walkable, livable neighborhoods without, concerns of neighborhood character or infringing on people's stuff like that. It's just common sense. And unfortunately, the bar is just too low at the moment. With, density like 18 units per acre, we don't even meet the state requirement for being able to say that we're able to put affordable housing there. So I live fairly close to Fremont Corners, and I see it as a tremendous opportunity. And that site has been underutilized for years. So it just makes sense to push for more density in places like that. And District 3 also has a fair amount of young families, as well as a large portion of Sunnyvale's aging population, and both are at risk of displacement. So we need to make sure that we have a plan for anti-displacement and explore rental assistance programs. Additionally, we also need to make sure that we're looking out for folks who are living on fixed incomes. It is critical that Sunnyvale remains a place for people of every single generation, and finding solutions for both those who are looking to start a family or gracefully age in place are my top priorities. And, it's not just people in homes that are at risk of displacement, because small businesses are too, and we need to make sure that our legacy businesses are able to continue to thrive. And so, to hop on my soapbox a little bit, we need to imagine a Sunnyvale where we don't aggressively tackle the housing crisis, where we allow displacement to run rampant, and we let all these people commute for miles and miles, and it's not a pretty picture. So thank you.
Right. Next is, what should be the city's responsibility toward the unhoused? And how would you implement this?
Absolutely. The city's responsibility towards the unhoused is pretty simple, to my mind. We have the ethical, humanitarian, and practical obligation to serve our homeless neighbors. There is a very clear cost when our community falls through the cracks. There's a study that was done by Destination Home back in 2015 that found the Santa Clara County community spent over $500 million per year to provide services to homeless individuals. That is, over the course of a decade, that is literally billions of dollars. And I'm sure the figures have only gone up since. So as I'm sure all of you already know, there's no silver bullet, but there are lots of common sense solutions that we can implement. So for one, we need to make sure that we're working with the county to create transitional housing opportunities where they make sense. For example, Mountain View and Santa Clara have approved Project Homekey sites, which allows them to take advantage of $33 million of state funding. We need to make sure that Sunnyvale is doing our fair share. By proactively identifying underutilized land in locations that make sense and are sensitive to neighbors, we can make sure that we're in a position to capitalize on all this money that is coming from the state. And this is something that I really, really want to thank Vice Mayor Cisneros and Councilmember Dean, who have really led this effort, and I'm proud to have their endorsements. So we also need to innovate, exploring the idea of a non-DPS response team that can act as a navigator to get people where they need to be. This is something that I think is really critical because we need to treat our unhoused neighbors with compassion. I think it is intuitive that it is not always the best, DPS is not always the best equipped to handle these sorts of situations, and we really need to explore alternatives. So other solutions also include partnerships with amazing community organizations who are doing the work, like the Downtown Streets team, like Sunnyvale Community Services, like Helping Hand Silicon Valley, and even faith groups who are stepping up to the plate. We have community members who are selflessly volunteering their time, and we need to who are doing the work, and the city needs to support them.
Okay, thank you. The last of the 2-minute questions is, what do you see as the obstacles to civic participation by all demographics in Sunnyvale, and how would you mitigate these?
Yeah, so I'll start off by stating the obvious. We clearly have some members of our community who are extraordinarily plugged in. At Livable Sunnyvale, I chaired the Moffett Park subcommittee, and we were able to really move the needle on Moffett Park. And we were also able to get the MOU for the mobile home park residents, in large part due to the tireless work of Gail Rubino and other advocates. And, unfortunately, as great as Livable Sunnyvale is, as great as the Dem Club is, I'd wager that many members of our community don't even know it exists because they've got other pressing things on their plate. When we have Sunnyvale residents working multiple jobs, stressed out about making rent because of the housing crisis, when we have climate hazards like extreme heat and smoke from wildfires, which we know for a fact hit some parts of our community more than others, and when we have 30% of our students in the Sunnyvale School District being socioeconomically disadvantaged, that is a crazy number, by the way, 30% of all students in Sunnyvale School District, it's going to be really hard for their parents, for their families, for people to find time to engage in arduous EIR processes. I don't even like to do that. And I don't have to worry about most of those things. It's, these EIRs and the development plans where they're going to, these things have tremendous impacts on people's lives, but they just simply don't have time to engage. And we need to make sure that it is easier for folks to do that than it currently is. And as seems to be the theme here, there's of course no silver bullet. So we first and somewhat, the easiest of them all, I think, is continuing remote meetings to make it easier for parents to participate without needing to find childcare. We really also need to turn up our push for equity. This, should not and absolutely cannot just be a buzzword. There are shocking disparities within our city. And we know that the trajectory of our kids' lives are so heavily influenced by the zip code that they're born into. And this is not right. Our tagline is the heart of Silicon Valley. And if we can't address these systemic issues here, and if we can't make sure that every member of the community has a voice in the civic process, then what good is all this innovation for? The city is hiring an equity manager who should create a strategy on this, and I will ensure that it gets done.
Great, thank you. Next is our lightning round with 30-second responses to 4 different questions. Are you ready to go?
Yeah, I'm all ears.
Okay. So first question, what are your top 3 priorities for Sunnyvale?
Absolutely. My top 3 priorities, I think first, harkening back to my roots, is really around sustainability. Serving on the Sustainability Commission, I think we're doing some really exciting visioning with Game Plan 2028. And we need to make sure that Sunnyvale continues to be a leader in this space. And my second priority, which falls in line with this, is making sure that Sunnyvale starts engaging more on the county level. We really need to lead with bold leadership and set a good example. We've seen some unfortunate news about, our neighbors and so on. And I think Sunnyvale is a really good chance to tackle these things, which also includes housing, because those are all intertwined.
All right, next question is, should the city increase the allowed density for village centers above 18 housing units per acre?
Why, Crystal, yes, I do think that. I absolutely agree that the city should increase the density of village centers. This is where it makes sense to go dense. These are once in a lifetime, once in a generation opportunities for us to really make a difference in housing stock. And we know so much about, like I said, where you grow up is so important. And growing up in South Sunnyvale myself, spending 26 years here, I want to make sure that opportunity is afforded to so many other people for generations to come. And we need to be bold right now when we build out our village centers, because there's no, want to save Martin to stop.
All right, next is, how important is diversity and representation on the council?
Diversity and inclusion is absolutely critical. Sunnyvale is an incredibly diverse city. I think one of my favorite statistics is actually that over 55% of Sunnyvale residents were born in another country. That is, again, over 55%. That is more than half. And so there are people that come here from all around the world for a reason. And it's because Sunnyvale is a good place for families. It's safe, it's stable, and we need leadership that represents that. We need leadership that is going to carry those values forward and is able to adequately represent the diverse population that we have.
Thanks. All right, the last question in the lightning round. Do you support banning the use of pesticides on city-owned property?
Yes, I certainly do. I think that, it goes without saying that there are people that live near city-owned property, and I wouldn't want those pesticides near my children or my family. And if the city of Sunnyvale wants to claim to be a leader in sustainability, a leader in environmentalism, then it is time for us to walk the walk and ban the usage of pesticides, because it's a no-brainer. These have been proven to be harmful to families, to students, to kids, and we need to get rid of them yesterday.
All right, that concludes the lightning round. You now have the opportunity for a 1-minute closing statement.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. So yeah, first and foremost, thank you everyone to the entire club for your time. I'm sure that Merle and I would both love to receive the endorsement of this club. And I think that we both have a love for Sunnyvale and have been here for decades. But I like to think that I have the perspective of both my family, my parents who moved here and, they came to college here and have been here for most of their adult lives, as well as myself, as someone who has grown up here and wants to figure out how to stay here. So I believe I'm the stronger candidate because of my policy expertise, and I will be able to work on the issues most critical to this club that transcend Sunnyvale's borders and jurisdiction, as I mentioned in my responses today. So I'd like to say that I wish I had the luxury of waiting for my turn, but if my parents taught me one thing, it's that we need to work hard for what we want. It's not going to happen by accident. And what I want, and what I believe we all want, is a vibrant, livable Sunnyvale now and into the future. In the midst of a climate crisis, with wildfires raging, water supplies drying up, and our neighbors struggling to find housing, I will work day in and day out to carry our democratic values to the council. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your statements and responses. And this concludes your interview time.
Thank you again. Thanks for keeping me honest, Martin.
That's what I do.
All right. So
And-
next, as Justin exits, we'll bring in Murli Srinivasan, also a candidate in District 3.
And I'll mention, because we probably mentioned this at some point, but candidates received the 2-minute questions in advance. Candidates did not receive the lightning round in advance. So if there's weird overlap between the responses, that is one of the reasons.
Oh, there's Murli. Okay. to search through all my Zoom boxes to find to find you. Hi, Murli, welcome.
Thank you.
All right, as I have mentioned before, we are recording the session. Is that okay with you, Murli?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. And the format is for each candidate to be interviewed individually and sequentially. The questions for each candidate are the same and have the same amount of response time. Martin is our timekeeper. And so Murli, if you can find him on your screen and pin his window, then you'll be able to see his time clock as soon as you start speaking. I'll be asking the questions, and we'll start with a 1-minute opening statement, and that will be followed by 6 questions each with a 2-minute response time, and then a lightning round of 4 questions with a 30-second response time, and finally a 1-minute closing statement. So are you ready, Murli?
Sure. I prepared for a 2-minute intro. I thought it was 2-minute intro, but that's okay. I can cut it down. So.
Okay. All right. And you can see Martin's.
The timer is not on yet. Okay. Yeah, I saw that.
Okay. And so when you're ready, you can begin your opening statement.
Good afternoon. It's my pleasure. Can I go, Martin? Yeah. Good afternoon. It's my pleasure and honor to be here. I have been a resident of District 3 for 25 years. In those years, I have served our community and neighborhood as a volunteer and a leader. I serve on boards of many nonprofits in the city. Many of you would have attended the Diwali celebration last year that I led to organize. I am also serving on the Sustainability Commission for the past 3 years. For all these efforts, I was awarded the Distinguished Resident of the Year by the Council. I have led large global teams and also started many companies. I served as the membership director of this club. I redesigned the membership process to make it easier to use and maintain. I seek your support to serve Sunnyvale. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Murli. Our first question with a 2-minute response time is, what are the top 3 challenges for your district, and what are you going to do about them?
Okay. Start. I have been a resident of Sunnyvale District 3 for more than 25 years. The top 3 challenges in District 3 are resident safety, traffic, and safe route to school. Our neighborhood has many ongoing incidents of car break-ins, chain snatching, racist attacks, and threatening violent incidents. As a neighborhood leader, I worked with DPS to investigate these incidents and report their findings and recommend safety precautions to be taken. We are working to have quarterly meeting with DPS to address safety and other concerns. These meetings are open for the entire city. Regarding traffic, District 3 is unique in that 5 major roads pass through that. These thoroughfares connect neighboring cities with Sunnyvale and Sunnyvale's job centers. Since these roads are all under the authority of Sunnyvale Traffic Department, we could look into using traffic calming measures, signal coordination, predictive and artificial intelligence algorithms to enable smoother traffic movement. After Wolf Road is repaired, we could look into optimizing lane configurations again. Regarding safe route to schools, Fremont High School is one of the critical school areas in District 3. It is at the intersection of 2 major streets with high traffic. There were multiple traffic accidents, including fatalities on Fremont Avenue and other streets near Fremont High School. We need to make full implementation of safe routes as a top priority, including safe biking and safe walking options for our students. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that response. The next question is, the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in Sunnyvale is from transportation. The Climate Action Playbook calls for a 20% per capita vehicle miles traveled reduction by 2030 to address this pollution. What should Sunnyvale do to expedite and incentivize this goal? 2 minutes, please.
Okay. VMT reduced considerably during the pandemic due to businesses adopting remote working. We should encourage local businesses to adopt remote working, additional staggered working schedules, and shared transportation options. Sunnyvale has 3 modes of public transportation: bus, train, and light rail. However, these are not connected to one another. We need a reliable, frequent connectivity between these transportation options so that we offer a full interconnected transportation options for the commuters. Some of the long-term solutions would include building a robust EV on-demand shuttle as a last-mile solution, exploring electric single occupancy vehicle, working with neighboring cities to expand their shuttle so that there is a workable option for commuting to the job centers in the city, collaborating with local business shuttle services to offer shared transportation options, build housing near transportation to reduce personal vehicle usage, allocating a portion of inclusionary housing for our teachers and city staff, exploring ways to fund active transportation plan, either full or portion of it to reduce VMT. We need to have both short-term and long-term solutions to reduce greenhouse gases. Thank you.
All right, here's the next question. Because Silicon Valley Clean Energy provides greenhouse gas-free electricity, what are city policies you would recommend for electrifying buildings, transportation, and other infrastructure?
Regarding electrification of electrifying buildings, these steps are to be taken. Adapt more aggressive reach code for buildings, collaborate with other regional cities in the region, other regional cities to arrive at a common reach code to achieve economy of scale and reduce implementation costs, ban new natural gas connections, educate residents on different options of heat pumps, space heating, and drying, expand alternate induction cooking stove leasing and training programs, explore ways to update our reach code regularly to reflect advances in building technology and advances in building materials. Now, regarding transportation, incentivize fuel switching from gas to electricity, have EV charging station options available in multi-residential units, public places, and mobile home parks, like the one built in downtown. In terms of infrastructure, we should provide robust public transportation connectivity and shared transportation options. The option should cater to all citizens of different income groups, income levels, and age. We should enable an extensive, reliable last mile options encompassing the entire city. We must encourage and automate accurate traffic reporting by local businesses to estimate the transportation impacts and metrics. Thank you.
All right, the next question is, Sunnyvale and the Bay Area continue to face a drastic housing shortage. What should the city be doing to reduce constraints to increasing housing stock? And what are the particular housing problems in your district, and what would you do to stop displacement?
Thank you. To address the housing shortage, the city should implement fully all the specific plans and study the impact of the implementation on the housing market, load on the city services such as road, water, sewage, open space, traffic, and quality of life. Village centers should be developed. In District 3, ADUs offer a good, viable option for increasing the housing stock. The city can explore options to incentivize development of ADUs. Regarding displacement, for renters, we need to see the impact of adoption of AB 1482. For mobile park renters, we need to accelerate the rent stabilization and lease agreements between the park owners and then the renters. For seniors, the city needs to collaborate with nonprofits and other agencies to provide enhanced legal, healthcare, and rental assistance. We need to strive to prevent displacement of our residents who want to age in their dwelling. Thank you.
Next is, what should be the city's responsibility toward the unhoused? And how would you implement this?
Thank you. I am assisting an organization that is working with unhoused community by providing food and other help with their needs. First, the city and all the residents should treat the unhoused with respect, dignity, and build their trust. The city can best serve the unhoused by further collaborating with local nonprofits. Some of the needs of unhoused are warming shelter during winter, water, telephone charging, shower, grooming, water and health and mental health, skills and vocational training to get a job to move out of the unhoused situation. Ways the cities can address some of these needs are good clean water facility near common areas, parks and library, as most of the water fountains are turned off during the pandemic. Telephone charging near library and parks, and including portable solar chargers near the camps. Because phones are the source of communication and then are the main communication and entertainment for the unhoused. Also provide a good public Wi-Fi connection for data usage. Shower and grooming facilities in local motels are a viable option. The city can provide funds for nonprofits to provide transportation, health, and mental health needs. Thank you.
All right, and this is the last of the 2-minute questions. What do you see as the obstacles to civic participation by all demographics in Sunnyvale? How would you mitigate these?
Thank you. The obstacles for civic participation are time-consuming and complex steps to participate in the meetings, language inconvenience, time inconvenience to attend the meetings. The city meetings are distributed as emails, posted on the website, and as printed material. So an infrequent participant must have access to the email or the web, or must drive to the city hall to get the printed copy. After these steps are time consuming. After all these steps, if the participant is not interested in the topic to be discussed, it's all wasted effort. So the participation becomes very, very less. One of the solutions is for the participant to specify the topics of interest. And when the topic is discussed in any of the meetings, the participant will be notified. All the meetings should be tagged with the topics of interest for easy search. For example, all the El Camino Real plan, whether it's discussed in Sustainability Commission or Planning Commission or the Council, should be tagged El Camino Real. So one search would give me all the results. The document should be made available in many languages. Also, the web content should be translated in different languages. For all the critical community projects, the city could do community outreach using banners and posters at heavily trafficked areas such as libraries, like what was done for the redistricting outreach, which was very, very effective. The city can also additionally notify the residents by working with the neighborhood associations. the city could explore other modes of access such as Nextdoor, push notification using city apps. Thank you. Oh, I believe.
All right, next is our lightning round with 30-second responses to
Okay.
4 different questions.
Okay,
Are you ready?
30-second response, you said?
30-second responses, yeah.
Okay, got it.
Okay, so first question is, what are your top 3 priorities for Sunnyvale?
The first one is the physical responsibility, housing, and traffic. Those 3 are my top priorities. Should I elaborate on that or?
You don't have to, but you have.
You have 20 seconds if you want to.
Oh, okay, okay. Fiscal responsibility is making sure that we manage our money. Of course, we have a 20-year budget plan. We need to make sure that all the money allocation is appropriately coming from the funds, proper funds. Housing, we all know that there is a drastic housing crisis. That's what I would focus on.
Great, thank you. Next is, should the city increase the allowed density for village centers above 18 housing units per acre?
Yes, we could increase it provided we have, that could be used for increasing the inclusionary housing. And then I strongly believe that inclusionary housing can be set aside for our city employees and then teachers working with the school districts. This is to reduce not only the VMT, but also the commute time for our staff and teachers.
All right, next is, do you support, how important is diversity in representation on the council?
Absolutely. I will be the first Indian to win the election. And then diversity brings different ideas. And then it's not just the ethnic diversity. I would also propose that it should be different backgrounds, such as engineers, doctors, lawyers, like that, professional experiences, which could bring different ideas and then different ways to solve the city's problems.
Okay, thank you. And the last of the lightning round questions, do you support banning the use of pesticides on city-owned property?
Oh man, yes, solid yes. In fact, we in Attica Park neighborhood, Attica Park was the first park in the city to pilot the pesticide-free park implementation. It was to be funded by the state department, California state. We collected 20 signatures in 3 hours. So yes, I strongly support that.
All right, that concludes our lightning round, and you now have the opportunity for a 1-minute closing statement.
Okay, we did. Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for giving me this opportunity, this chance to state my positions and priorities. Thank you, Sunnyvale Democratic Club, for this opportunity. I have worked to develop communities to foster communal harmony and celebrate our diversity. I have revitalized organizations, systems, and re-established civil communications in my neighborhood, as well as helped others. I am committed to continue to build better communities, relationships, and processes to help improve our society. With your vote, I can continue to achieve these goals as a Sunnyvale City Council member. In addition to my council duties, I want to dedicate myself to work for the vulnerable, hear the unheard, and serve the underserved. Please support me and join me in this journey. Together, we will make Sunnyvale an even better city. Thank you very much.
Crystal,
Muted,
you're
You're on
Crystal.
mute.
Yes, thank you so much, Marley, for your statements and responses. And that concludes our interview time with you. Next, we will switch to Richard Mellinger.
Should I leave the room, Martin, or how does that? I will be automatic.
Yeah, just if you just leave the room, leaving the breakout room or the meeting, just whatever
Okay.
works for you.
All right, super. Yeah, next will be Richard Mellinger for District 5. He's so far the only Democratic candidate running in that seat.
Yes, there is one other candidate running in that seat who is not a registered Democrat.
Hi there.
I'll also just note that I did ask all of the candidates about family and paid staff, and nobody volunteered anyone. So hence the lack of people other than candidates that we've been moving in and out.
Yes, got it. Yes, welcome, Richard.
Hello. Hello.
Yes, the format, I'll just repeat for your benefit, is each candidate is interviewed individually and sequentially. The questions for each candidate are the same, and each will have the same amount of response time. Martin is our timekeeper, and I will be asking the questions. And we'll start with a 1-minute opening statement, followed by 6 questions, each with a 2-minute response time, a lightning round of 4 questions with a 30-second response time, and a 1-minute closing statement.
All right.
First, before we start, make sure that you can see Martin's Zoom square, and you might want to pin it so that you can continue seeing it.
Yep.
And when you're ready, you can begin with your 1-minute opening statement.
All right, sure. Well, thank you all for having me, folks. My name is Richard Mellinger, and I'm running to represent District 5 on our city council as only the second out queer council member in city history. For those of you who don't know, D5 runs roughly from the Caltrain tracks to 101. So I'm running because I have the experience and the values to meet the challenges that our city and D5 face. So a little about me. I moved to Sunnyvale 11 years ago. About 5 years ago, I started to get engaged in local politics because the rent was too damn high. Since then, I've served as chair of the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Commission, spent 4 years on the board of this club, most recently as vice president, and spent 4 years on the board of Livable Sunnyvale, including as chair from 2020 to 2021. So I've got the experience, I've got the progressive values, which I'll be talking about when we get into the Q&A portion. I'm endorsed by Senator Becker, Assembly Member Lowe, Supervisor Lee, Mayor Klein, Vice Mayor Cisneros, many others. I hope to earn your support today. And with that, let's dive in.
All right, thank you. Our first question is, what are the top 3 challenges for your district, and what are your proposals to address them?
Fantastic. So I'm going to do the politician thing. There are 4, but they are all tightly interrelated. The first is housing. Surprise, surprise coming from me. We need to be building many more homes, and not just luxury townhouses. We need to be prioritizing starter homes like stack flat condos and come up with new approaches to get more subsidized affordable housing built, especially teacher and civil servant workforce housing and housing for adults with developmental disabilities. Second is active transportation. So District 5 is carved up by dangerous high-speed roads, Matilda, Fair Oaks, Wolf, Kiefer, Arquez, Central. It is exceedingly difficult for our residents to get around without a car. I've chaired the BPAC for the past 3 years, and that's why I will be working to fully build out the city's active transportation plan and fully implement and strengthen Vision Zero, which calls for the total elimination of serious traffic crashes in Sunnyvale. Next is retail. A number of older commercial sites in my district are designated as village centers, including the one containing the only full-service supermarket north of the track, the Matilda's Lucky's. We need to make sure that as these sites redevelop, the vital retail services they provide are retained and that the small businesses that operate in those sites are protected. So I will work to reform the village centers to bring real mixed use density and to ensure that those businesses get a fair shake during redevelopment. Finally, education. So yes, I know I'm not running for school board, but council still has a role to play. The closure of Sunnyvale High School, which is in District 5 over 40 years ago, created a serious equity issue. Kids in our district have to travel as much as 4 miles to get to their high school. That's why I'll specifically work to prioritize safe routes to Fremont High School from North Sunnyvale. And I will also work with the school districts and Foothill De Anza to explore providing additional resources, educational resources to students of all ages in North Sunnyvale. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And our next question, the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in Sunnyvale is from transportation. The Climate Action Playbook calls for a 20% per capita vehicle miles traveled reduction by 2030 to address this pollution. What should Sunnyvale do to expedite and incentivize this goal?
Fantastic question. So people drive because it's either unsafe, inconvenient, or both for them to walk, bike, or take public transit. That's why we need to fully build out our active transportation plan and expand it so that people can easily and safely walk, scoot, skate, or ride to their destination without having to drive. And one idea that I have proposed, and that I think is a very good one, although we have to look at bond rates on this, is the possibility of a bond measure to fund either active transportation or green infrastructure. Now, there are a lot of wrinkles to that. I'm happy to talk more about that offline. So we also need to really commit to Vision Zero. That means truly, seriously prioritizing safety over traffic throughput. Now, this is also a land use issue. If we want to really leverage public transit, that means we do need to change the way we're doing our land use. We need to be building more homes in high opportunity areas close to the services people need, like the Caltrain, like the high schools. We should be prioritizing mixed use, work, live, play development so that people don't have to drive to get to where they need to go. If we want better bus service or even bus rapid transit, we need to be building at the densities to support it. This also means that we need to change some of our regulations. So currently the city requires 2 bundled parking spaces for most new homes. This amounts to a subsidy for driving. It encourages people to drive. It encourages households to have 2 cars instead of 1. And by the way, if we think about this in terms of getting households from 2 cars to 1, instead of getting households to 0 cars, I think you'll find that that is a much more achievable goal and will still have a very real impact. So subsidizing cars is the opposite of what we want. We need to make it easier to walk, easier to bike, easier to take public transit, and we need to stop prioritizing cars over those options. Thank you.
All right, thanks for that. Here's the next question. Because Silicon Valley Clean Energy provides greenhouse gas-free electricity, what are city policies you would recommend for electrifying buildings, transportation, and other infrastructure?
Fantastic question. So for buildings, we recently passed expanded REACH codes, which mostly eliminate natural gas from new construction. We should be looking for ways to further expand on these REACH codes. We should also ensure that the city is prioritizing electric everything on its own capital expenditures, including when we're replacing fleet vehicles with EVs and minimizing any new fossil fuel infrastructure. From a transportation perspective, the city should be actively encouraging the adoption of electric bicycles, not just electric cars. E-bikes are relatively inexpensive and allow people to commute distances that would typically require a car easily and conveniently. They also have a considerably lower ecological footprint than even an electric car. The city currently hosts seminars promoting electric car ownership. We should be giving electric bikes equal billing. I currently have a deferred study issue to establish parking standards for electric bicycles and scooters, which require secure fire-safe storage as well as an outlet to charge from. I'd like to see this study issue move forward in the next couple of years. We also need to be looking at our charging infrastructure and not just in terms of how many EV charging spots we have. So I drive a plug-in Prius, and finding spots with working chargers is a consistent challenge. And a recent study found that something like 1/4 of EV chargers in the country are offline at any given time. So we need to make it easier to find chargers and ensure that they are consistently online. Finally, we should be looking at encouraging the use of cross-laminated timber in construction. CLT allows the construction of tall buildings with far less steel or concrete, both of which are carbon intensive to produce. It also turns the buildings themselves into a carbon sink, since rather than decaying and being re-released into the atmosphere, the carbon in that lumber is kept locked up in the building itself. So these are just a few ways that we can move toward greater decarbonization. And I can assure you that I'm very open to other ideas. Thank you.
All right, the next question. Sunnyvale and the Bay Area continue to face a drastic housing shortage. What should the city be doing to reduce constraints to increasing housing stock? What are the particular housing problems in your district, and what would you do to stop displacement?
Excellent question. So I got involved in politics because of the housing crisis. It is a truism that we hear often that no one city can solve the housing crisis. But friends, what if one city tried to? Sunnyvale is the heart of Silicon Valley, and I believe that we have a vital role to play in solving our regional housing crisis. So first and foremost, we need to be working to increase density and housing production in all areas of the city. While I will always support building more housing in District 5, it is not fair or right that the majority of past and planned housing production in the city, the vast majority, is north of El Camino, and most of that north of the tracks, which is consistently ranked, if you saw Mike Cerrone's background, as one of the lowest opportunity areas in the city. Even if you're fine with that, the state won't be. New state laws require our housing element to affirmatively further fair housing, which means that we cannot simply concentrate housing production in a few areas, especially when those areas are lower opportunity. If we don't take this seriously, the state could reject our housing element, which would gut our ability to exercise local control over development. Now, there is no one silver bullet policy to address the housing crisis. One thing that we could do is apply density bonuses to encourage the construction of more stacked flat condos rather than townhouses. Most of the new ownership construction we're seeing in the city, including in my district, is townhouses, and new, those go for at least 1.6 million. Condos are far less expensive, even new, and would offer more ownership opportunities to residents. We also need to be looking at ways to bring more subsidized affordable housing online, again, especially for teachers and civil servant workforce housing. We also need to be increasing tenant protections to fight displacement. I'm proud to see the right to lease ordinance, which I first proposed nearly 5 years ago, moving forward. There's also a proposal to require relocation assistance for no-fault just cause evictions. City is having a Zoom meeting about these measures on Wednesday at 6. Please come and speak in favor. I'd also support requiring just cause for eviction from day one of a lease. That would be a change that we could make that I would strongly support. Thank you.
All right, next is what should be the city's responsibility toward the unhoused, and how would you implement this?
So thank you very much for this very important question. Let me start by saying that Sunnyvale's unhoused residents are our neighbors. They deserve our love, our support, and kindness. Certainly, we should do no harm. That means that I will oppose sweeps that disrupt people's lives and destroy their possessions simply to move them along. If it becomes necessary to clear an encampment, we should not do so until we are able to obtain shelter for the residents of that encampment, as we did with the Fair Oaks Park residents. I also support exploring the establishment of a homeless services coordinator within the city, as Councilmember Spitaleri recently proposed. Unfortunately, we also have a deeply constrained city budget. That's why it is vitally important to work to build partnerships with the county and the state to end homelessness. We need to work with the county to expand the services available at the Hamlin Court Shelter. We should be actively seeking Measure A supportive housing funding for supportive housing projects, as well as Project Home Key conversions and safe parking, establishing a safe parking program. This will help support our neighbors who live in their vehicles. I want to add that there is no evidence that increasing services will attract more unhoused residents. Most of our unhoused neighbors are from here. They're from the Bay. They lost their housing because the rent is too damn high. That's why we need to be attacking the root cause of homelessness. And that root cause is very, very clear. It is the rent. That is why places that are worse off than Sunnyvale on almost every conceivable metric, places like Detroit and Mississippi and West Virginia, also have far, far lower homelessness rates than the Bay Area. So if we actually want to end homelessness, instead of just fighting a constant rearguard action, we need to pass tenant protections to reduce displacement, and we need to build enough homes to start actually bringing rents down. Thank you.
All right, the last of the 2-minute questions is, what do you see as the obstacles to civic participation by all demographics in Sunnyvale, and how would you mitigate these?
Great question. So it is a very well documented fact at this point that in the US, public commenters tend to be older, whiter, maler, straighter, wealthier, more likely to own property, and more conservative in general than the general public. The book to read on this, by the way, is Neighborhood Defenders. This is because public comment is time consuming. You have to wait sometimes hours to give a 3-minute comment. Most working people can't do that. They have kids, they have jobs, they have housework, they have dinner to cook. So with the rise of call-in public comment with the pandemic has actually made public meetings more accessible than ever. We should absolutely keep that. but it is not enough. So we need to be expanding direct outreach to our residents. That means going to them where they are. The occasional booth at the farmer's market or the art and wine festival, that's great, but we need to be doing more. One of the things the city did with the redistricting process was setting up booths at grocery stores, especially ethnic markets in the city, to get feedback from people, going about their daily shopping. So let's also try to increase the city's social media presence on Instagram and TikTok. Let's try to increase participation in our online surveys. I've seen those. We're doing them more frequently. That's great. And when we do host in-person meetings, let's make sure to provide childcare and translation services. So one other thing, and this is getting into my day job actually, is we need to make Access Sunnyvale easier to use. Currently, it is borderline unusable on mobile devices. It takes me about 5 minutes if I want to file an abandoned shopping cart response report from my phone. That's a major problem considering most of the issues people are going to want to report are going to be the ones they find when they're out and about. So we need to redesign Access Sunnyvale, make it much more user-friendly. I want to say this is my professional opinion as a front-end software developer. Then once we do that, maybe we can also make Access Sunnyvale a gateway by which more people can get involved in the civic life of the city. This is a very important topic. And again, I'm extremely open to suggestions. I got my contact information on my background. If you've got ideas, shoot me an email. Thank you.
Okay, next is our lightning round with 30-second responses to 4 different questions.
All right.
Are you ready?
As I'll ever be.
Okay. First question, what are your top 3 priorities for Sunnyvale?
My top 3 priorities for Sunnyvale are making sure that the housing element process is successful and meets the state standards on affirmatively furthering fair housing. It is reforming the village centers to ensure that we get meaningful density and that the small businesses on those sites are protected. And it's fully building out the active transportation plan and fully implementing Vision Zero.
Okay, thank you. Next is, should the city increase the allowed density for village centers above 18 housing units per acre?
Absolutely. 18 housing units per acre is not even close to enough. And the problem with the current density is it doesn't support mixed use. Classic mixed use is apartments over ground floor retail. With 18 units an acre, you don't get that. You get townhouses with retail shoehorned into a little corner of the complex. That doesn't work. 18 units per acre also cannot be counted towards our affordable housing quotas in the RENA process for our housing element. You need a minimum of 30 units an acre to do that. So I strongly support raising the density of the village centers to at least 30 units an acre with commercial protections for the small businesses.
All right. Next is, how important is diversity in representation on the council?
I think it's absolutely critical. One of the phrases that I've heard over and over again is if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And so, the city's decision to switch to districts in the past few years has really increased representation on our city council. And I think it's vital for our residents to be able to look at the city council and see their own face there, see it as something that they could be able to do. Like, that's how we drive engagement. That's how we drive participation. And it's critical for justice. I wish I could say more on this.
All right. Last lightning round question is, do you support banning the use of pesticides on city-owned property?
Strongly inclined to. I would need to see details on it, in terms of what exactly would be banned and what exactly is, the alternatives are. But pesticides are literally poison. We should not be, if they are to be used, they should be used extremely sparingly. And we should be instead prioritizing things like native landscaping, which is naturally resistant to pests. So strongly inclined to support, would need to see the details.
All right, that concludes the lightning round. And you now have the opportunity for a 1-minute closing statement.
Fantastic. Well, I want to say thank you all for having me. I've sat through quite a lot of these on your all side of the table. I got to say, it's something of a novel experience and quite an honor to be on this side of the camera. So at the beginning of this interview, I said I'm the candidate with the experience and the values to meet the challenges that District 5 and our city face. I hope I've demonstrated that here. As the only Democrat running to represent District 5, I want to humbly ask for your support and your endorsement. I know that we've only had a short time together. So if you want to learn more about my campaign, please check out my website at www.richardforsunnyvale.com. You can email me, you can text me, phone number, email are in the background up there. I'll make sure that you all have those. Finally, I am not taking any corporate or developer contributions on this campaign. So if what I said resonated, I hope that you'll consider donating. Thank you all for having me. Onwards, let's get this done. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Richard, for your statements and responses. And that concludes our interview. Great.